Welcome to the adult Bible class. It is less fun and engaging, so I'm sorry. I do have a lot of pictures tonight, so that'll be cool. When Tracy called me the other day to come speak on VBS, he said, your theme is animals. And I said, well, that's pretty broad and generic. I said, what are we doing for VBS? What's the AP Flood VBS? I'm like, oh, I really like that. So what I have on the screen is, this is basically AP's curriculum for the adult Bible class. That's what we did at Arnold last year. So I had access to some of it. And then I've added some as we go on because tonight is pretty much, it's a little bit about the animals that are on the ark, but it's pretty much about some of the animals that we maybe are most curious about as a culture and as a society today, and that is dinosaurs. Dinosaurs is probably my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to Christian evidences and apologetics. So I'm pretty super excited about this. And I know that we were covering when I was able to come out more often than I am right now. This Manna Project thing's got me all busy, and I'm blessed to have the opportunity to tell you all about it on Sunday. But well, I know we were covering some Christian evidences. So if we covered dinosaurs when I was doing that, don't tell me. And this will all just be a review. And if we didn't, or if you missed that, then it's all going to be new stuff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the animals that are on the ark. That is the plan, maybe. All right. It's going to work now. Yeah, there it is. All right, let's talk about the animals. And again, when we're talking about all this stuff, all of the animals that went on the ark, we're going to talk about dinosaurs for predominantly the most of it, but I do want to spend some time on the animals that went on. And we talk about the ark. This is kind of the mindset that we all have, right? All these animals coming in, but you notice that there's some pterodactyls and some stegosauruses that are right behind the elephants. And when we talk about animals that are coming on the ark, let's do some basic Bible trivia. How many of each animal came on the ark? 2. And, see, everybody remembers the animals came on 2 by 2. And then what's the other number? 7. Why were there 7? So you have 2 of these kind of animals. What kind of animals were there 7 of?
They had to have something to eat while they was on there. They ate some of the animals, and plus a lot of the other stuff they took with them.
All right, we're going to get to that here in just a second. But 7 is the right number. What kind of animals were those? Clean or unclean? Clean, right? So of all the unclean animals that were on the face of the earth, they went in 2 by 2, right? They went in the ark 2 by 2 so that they could reproduce when they got out. And you think of the mortality rates when we get into wild populations of animals all across the world. We get into, just deer and turkey production here in Missouri. Now, that's something I follow pretty closely because I like to hunt. Every year we're talking about the turkey hatch or all the deer fawns that are getting eaten by coyotes. And, there's 2 animals to reproduce. Is God involved in all of this process? Is he going to bring 2 animals on that are not going to produce and be fruitful? No. God is in control of bringing the animals to and getting them on the ark, right? Noah opens the door, God shuts the door as they all go in. God is in charge of bringing all of these animals here, and we don't really stress out or worry about or think about that part too much, right? All the animals went on the ark. God was involved in that 2 by 2 for all the unclean. As for all the clean animals, they were there for the ability to reproduce, right? They were also there so that Noah and his family could sacrifice them. We're not given any record of sacrifices happening on the ark, obviously during the first 40 days. They were on the ark for a little over, I'm sure that y'all covered this already, but for a little over a year they were on the ark from the time they went in to the time everything dried up enough for them to leave. Right? It's a long time to be on a boat with all these animals, with all of your family. Sometimes you go camping for a weekend and you're ready to just be away from folks. Imagine being cooped up in a thing full of animals and stink and all the great stuff that was going on there. That would have been involved on the ark. So you have all of these animals. And I know that as we talk about the ark, there's all these statistics about how many animals can fit and how many railroad cars worth of storage capacity that is, but that's not my topic tonight. My topic is about the animals themselves. And so we have them for reproduction purposes. We have them for sacrificial purposes. Once they get out, in Genesis chapter 10, we see that they get off the ark. God gives them for the first time the ability to eat meat, right? From Genesis chapter 1 all the way up to Genesis chapter, really 6, and everybody getting on the ark. So Genesis 1 through 10, we don't see anybody consuming flesh of any kind. It's only after Genesis chapter 10 that we see God giving the command for man to be able to eat the animals. Until this time, everybody's kind of living happy as they go along. So the fact that we get to be meat eaters makes Genesis chapter 10 one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. I've probably told y'all this before, but what is the greatest chapter in all the Bible? It's not Genesis chapter 1 in the creation. It's not Acts chapter 2 in the beginning of the church. It's Acts chapter 10. Do we know why Acts chapter 10 is the best chapter in the Bible? Because in the beginning of that, where God comes to Peter, right, and tells him to go over here to preach to these folks, he says there are no longer anything unclean. We get pork, we get bacon, and we get barbecue in Acts chapter 10. That's what makes it the most important chapter in the whole Bible. Now, am I joking when I say that? Yeah, a little bit. But those are two chapters, Genesis chapter 10, Acts chapter 10, where God opens up different kind of meat for us to be able to eat as humans. Now, we think about all the animals that go on. I'm spending a few minutes now talking about all the different kinds of animals that go on before we get into dinosaurs themselves. Did Noah have every breed of dog that was available to take on the ark? Did he need every kind of cat, every kind of dog, every kind of elephant, every kind of whatever? No, right? So when we talk about, a lot of skeptics, a lot of atheists and agnostic folks, they want to say, well, there's no way that all the animals in the world, even 2 of them at a time, could have fit on the ark. We don't need every breed of dog. We just need 2 dogs. We don't need every breed of cat. We just need 2 cats. The same goes for our color of skin. You get 2 olive-skinned people, right? 2 Middle Eastern-looking people. And from those, genetically, we can prove, using those little Punnett squares that we talk about in 7th grade biology, we can take our skin tones, and from 2 Middle Eastern, olive-skinned people, the way we call it, rephrase it, you get the whitest white folks, the Scandinavian white Irish folks, and you get the darkest of dark African folks. And what that is just, we as Christians believe in evolution. Don't let anybody tell you we don't. We don't believe in macroevolution. We don't believe in the changing of species, right? We don't believe that there was nothing and all of a sudden there was something, and this amoeba turned into this bacteria that turned into this lizard that turned into this dinosaur that turned into this bird. That's not what changing between species is. Macroevolution. That's what Charles Darwin is advocating. We believe in microevolution. Anybody have a breed of a dog that's not a wolf? Anybody got a dog at your house that's not a wolf? Then that's microevolution, right? Changes within a species, right? We breed all these dogs to get these kind of things, these kind of traits. Some people are breeding cats now that they have dog-like qualities. They play fetch and they come and they just, it's so weird. You'll see a video of those online. That's not a cat anymore. I don't know what it is. It's an abomination. But that is microevolution, and we as Christians believe in all that, right? We see that every single day. We see that when we look at all of our brethren across the world with different skin colors. The ark landed on Mount Ararat, and is that the Mount Ararat that we know of today? No, but it's in the ballpark somewhere in there. Shem went up this way. Ham went over here. All these folks went out this way, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Japheth went over here. Ham went down through here. We get the Cushites and all these folks. As they traveled into Africa and things are way more tropical and they're out in the sun all the time, they develop more melanin in their skin, right? And then we have darker skinned folks. The folks who went up into what we would call Europe, and it's more cloudy and there's more trees and there's more all this other stuff, well, they didn't need as much, right? And they got whiter white. All of that comes from the genetic material that is available upon the ark. We're talking about kinds of animals, not species, not breeds. And then they really still want to talk about, what about the dinosaurs? We need to understand that this is where we lose some folks. This is where, from a worldly perspective, the tinfoil hats come out. Wait, you're telling me that man and dinosaurs cohabitated? How many people heard about dinosaurs when you were in grade school? Right? 365 million years ago, right? And it wasn't until a few tens of thousands of years ago that really that man came upon the face of the planet the way we are today. Right? Neanderthals, maybe 100,000 years ago, but this is the evolutionary old earth kind of mentality. And so when you say that dinosaurs, 365 million years ago, mankind 12,000 years ago, are cohabitating this same space, well, you are crazy. Any second grader can tell you that's not the case. It is the case. And as Christians, we have to believe it. And if we're going to believe it, we need to understand some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, because people are going to have questions. So we talk about, does the Bible even mention dinosaurs? And they go through quite a lot of effort here to talk about it, and We'll talk about it as they have. These are all their slides for the most part. Animals in the Bible that never are mentioned. Cats, kangaroos, elephants, aardvarks, anteaters, platypuses, penguins. The list goes on and on and on and on. Are there cats? Have I got a cat at the house? I kind of like my cat sometimes. Cats are never mentioned in the Bible. A lot of these things all these things on the board and a lot more to boot are never ever mentioned in Scripture. Does that mean they're not real? No. Or have you read the Bible anywhere and seen the word dinosaur? No, that's not really how that works, right? And then, for that reason, they have this. The Bible was completed about 1900 years ago, right in at about 70 AD. It was translated into English for the first time by Cloverdale in 1535. The English word dinosaur was not, coined until 1842. We didn't know, and so it's important for us to remember why the word dinosaur was coined in 1842. This is the first time that we as a society dug up these bones and put them back together and said, whoa, what is this thing? This is not a cow, this is not a buffalo, this is not anything that we have ever seen. What is this thing? Well, it is a fearfully or terribly great lizard. Dinosaur. What did we call dinosaurs before we called them dinosaurs? Dragons. And we're going to talk a lot about dragons here in just a minute. Right? You'll never read the word dinosaur in an English Bible because that word was invented afterwards. You got to think the first time we put together a skeleton and looked at this and said, whoa, we've never seen nothing like this. We need a new word for this. Was 20 years before the Civil War happened. You know, in the time scale of the world, that's not that awful long ago, right? Civil War started in 1861 here in 1842. I mean, it's not that long ago. You know, in another 61 years, the airplane will be invented. Right? This is not that long ago where we have coined this. And that's something I want to keep in mind. Like, this whole modern concept of dinosaurs is modern. It's new from a historical perspective. You know, not very long at all. Modern translations obviously don't use the word dinosaur, blah, blah, blah. Evidence is that dinosaurs and humans coexisted. This is the bread and butter of what we're going to cover this evening. It is absolutely incredible when we start looking at it. We're going to start with the Bible and move on from there. The Bible itself, the creation account, right? God created all land animals on day 6, Genesis chapter 1. We get that. There are no land animals that were not created on day 6. So keep that in mind, right? On the 6th day, the Lord made the heavens and the sea and all that is in them. There are several other passages in the Old and New Testament that corroborate this, right, that say that all land animals were created on day 6. We know that the dinosaurs lived. Does anybody, so I was teaching a teen class at Arnold, I don't know, a year ago maybe, and there was a foster kid in there. We have several families at Arnold that foster, so there's all these random kids that come through sometimes. And, you know, Avery's like, hey, I'm going to be gone tomorrow. Can you cover the teen class? I'm like, sure. My favorite thing to do is, what questions do you have? Let's just cover what's on your mind right now. And this one gal that's, it's only her first or second week at church, she said, what about the dinosaurs? I had this, I think it was some nun in some Catholic school, that says dinosaurs were given to us by God as a challenge to our faith. They obviously weren't real. This is a hoax by the world. I'm like, what? No. You ever walk into a natural history museum, the Science Center up in Forest Park, and be like, dinosaurs are real, y'all. I've got stacks of fossils. I collect fossils. I collect all sorts of weird stuff. But I like fossils because they're direct evidence of the global flood. When you're out somewhere and you see this fossil, right, there's a shell embedded in a rock somewhere. That happened during the global flood. You can pick that up and give this to your kid and say, this is a souvenir from the flood of Noah. This is when this was laid down. 99% chance that's exactly when it occurred, right? 99% of all of our fossil beds were laid down during this global epidemic called the flood. I'm like, whoa, dinosaurs are not a test of our faith. Dinosaurs are for real. And we need to talk about them, right? The Bible talks about dinosaurs. We know that dinosaurs are real. They've moved her now, but you walk into the Field Museum in Chicago, and Sue, the most complete skeleton of a T-Rex ever been dug up sits there waiting for you to walk in. Way cool to see. Dinosaurs are real. We know that dinosaurs existed. So just put this into logical equation here, right? If dinosaurs existed and they walked on the land, and we know they did, they got legs, right? Most dinosaurs got legs. Some's got wings, some got tails, and they swim in the water, but most dinosaurs have legs, right? That means they walked on the land. If dinosaurs are real, we know that they are, and they walked on land, what had to have occurred? They had to have been created on day 6. Who else was created on day 6? We were, mankind. From the beginning, man and dinosaurs have walked together. Now, what about dinosaurs on the ark? Well, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But just keep in mind that we did live together. The creation account. If dinosaurs are real, and we know they are, then they had to have been created by God. So we know, just from Genesis 1, if no other place, and then Job 40, 15 through 24. It's interesting. I love Job. I'm teaching Job on Wednesday nights in 6 weeks. So if y'all know Tom Wessel, Tom is teaching for me tonight since I'm here. And he's got 11 chapters of Job to cover tonight. I covered 12, I think, last week. We're screaming through Job. But I get chapters 40 and 41 by themselves next week, and I'm super excited about it because I get to talk about dinosaurs, right? So behold the behemoth and leviathan. So right, we get into verse 15 of Job chapter 40. Behold behemoth, which I made as I made you, right? This is God talking to Job, right? Answering all these questions that he's had. Or not answering, but answering says, establishing his superiority and supremacy. Behold his strength in his loins and the power of his muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar, right? Like a cedar of Lebanon. That is the idea. His sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like the bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword from the mountains, yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. He shades in lotus trees, and they cover him. The willows and the brooks surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Some people say, this is a hippopotamus. Have you ever seen the tail of a hippopotamus? And by the way, it's only when I lead singing that I can't pronounce that word. But the kids seem to like it when I say hippopotamus, right? Have you ever seen the tail of a hippopotamus? Does it look like a redwood, a giant cedar tree, a sequoia? No, it's a dinky little old thing, right? Ain't good for nothing hardly. Can't be a hippopotamus. When we talk about, so he moves his tail like a cedar, his bones are like beams or tubes of bronze, right? Giant beams, building timbers. How big are these bones? 6, 8, 10 foot tall. They've seen these bones, right? Look at the, can one take him in his eyes? Can you pierce his nose with a snare? When you come near, bring your sword. We attacking these things. Keep that in mind. Behold Leviathan, this gets into chapter 41. Can you draw Leviathan with a fishhook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose and pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant? All these things. Traders bargain over him, divide him. All of this description, right? We get down into verses 18 through 21. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils come smoke, as from a boiling pit and burning rushes. Here is a fire-breathing dinosaur. When you put fire-breathing and a big lizard in context, what do you call that? A dragon. And we've had dragons for millennium. Everybody's got dragons, which is kind of where we're going next here. So the Bible itself talks about dinosaurs, talks about dragons. You look at Job 40, you look at Job chapter 41, God is answering Job out of a whirlwind, and he says nothing weird, nothing metaphorical. It's all just physical evidence of God and his creation. Where were you, Job, when all this happened? Where were you, Job, when I made the dinosaurs? Where were you, Job, when I settled the bounds of the earth? Where were you? There's no fantastic anything happening in Job 40 and 41. This is just straight up an account. Here are some of the biggest and baddest creatures that Job would have known in his day, and God is using them to illustrate a point. Here are these big old bad mean dinosaurs, Job. Where were you when I made them? You see how big and how powerful they are. Where are you at in this whole creation scheme? Is what God is trying to get Job to understand. So in history, oh man, this is good stuff. Maybe. The word dinosaurs is not used. Before that, there were dragons. We talked about all this, blah, 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 blah. Dragons. Matter of fact, we unearthed a skeleton back in, they've got it here, in 2003 in South Dakota. Dracarys means dragon king. That's what it looks like. They unearthed this thing and said, man, this thing looks like a dragon. It looks like all these medieval paintings that we've seen. Yeah, I bet you it does. Dinosaurs and man, stories, legends account. Every major culture around the world has stories of dragons. But they're not, we didn't invent the word, we, people, invented the word dinosaur 250 years ago. Before that, they used the word dragon, great serpent, whatever they used. 1,000 years ago, dragons were such familiar creatures that what they looked like and how they behaved was common knowledge to every man, woman, and child. And I'm going to show you some pictures and some things here in a minute that prove that. Before we get into that, though, there are some historical evidence, right? Written historical accounts from legitimate sources that talk about dragons. Josephus, as he's accompanying folks and he's traveling through the Holy Lands, he talks about these little winged serpents that spew sparks out of their mouth. He's not talking about dragons. He's talking about, man, we tried to make camp one night and these things kept attacking us. It was just a pain. It's not a story about fighting dragons. It's not a fable. It's not a myth. It's not legend. It's just some historical account Josephus was writing down. We all understand Josephus is a noted historian, right? A lot of what we know about the destruction of Jerusalem, about the beginnings of the first century church, right? You know, Josephus talks about Jesus being a historical figure. Josephus is a historian. He's writing about these little dinosaurs, dragons that are flying around, these lizards with wings flying around, spewing sparks out of their mouth. Great pain when you're setting up camp. What do you do with stuff like that? That's a great pain when you're setting up camp. You shoot it with bows and arrows. You just trap it and you cut it up. We're going to start answering some of those questions like, what happened to all the dinosaurs? There are medieval accounts. And I'm not talking about like all the fables and things that we're familiar of and St. George and Grendel and Beowulf and all this stuff. No, there are written historical accounts from monks, right? You know, June the 14th, 1497. Farmer John plowed his field today. Oh, we're not talking to you. Shh. Farmer John planted his field today. So-and-so caught 3 fish and brought them to the town market. There were 2 giant dragons fighting over a dead deer carcass in Farmer Phillips' field, right? May 14th, 2042, or whatever it is. There were 2 great serpents fighting in the sky over this forest. Sister so-and-so brought in 14 rabbits for us to clean for dinner tonight, right? It's historical accounts. He's just saying, hey, we saw 4 deer tonight on the way to church. Hey, there were 3 dragons out here in this guy's field. They were eating a deer. Written historical accounts. Oh, that's fantastic. Show me the fantasy. Show me the fable. Nobody's writing a Tolkien epic over here. This guy's recording the news for today. And in that, there were 2 dragons in this field eating a deer. All sorts of historical written accounts. But I mean, not even talking about pictures that we're going to see in a minute. All sorts of written historical accounts that prove that people came across dinosaurs, dragons, every day. They knew exactly what they were. They knew exactly what they did and how they functioned. But from a story and a legend account, every culture. And I hope that when you talked about the flood, you talked about this, because this is one of my favorite parts about the flood. Every single culture in the world has a flood myth. And every single one of them gets part of it, right? There were 8 people, or there was a boat, or the gods saved the people because they told them when the flood was coming. All these things, right? The Chinese word for ship, right, is 8 people in water. It's like, how did we come up with this? All of this cool anecdotal evidence from a world cultural perspective that just shows us that everybody had dragons. It wasn't a localized phenomenon. North, South America, Asia, Europe, Africa, all the major continents. Nobody's living in Antarctica for us to be able to ask them. And you got to think, during the flood, we have this massive movement of tectonic plates. We go from what we would call Pangea, right, from a scientific perspective, to more or less the continental positions that we have today. All of this stuff is happening. I love this. This whole thing is my favorite thing. talking about the flood, right? All the geothermal stuff that's going on. The heavens are opening up. All of these things are happening, changing the world. The animals go to their separate places. We think that God has some hand in that. The Ice Age immediately follows. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The flood allowing all these land bridges to exist for animals to travel, for people to travel. All this kind of stuff's happening. And we're carrying tales of the flood with us. That's why in every culture around the world we have flood myths. We have dragons, because the dinosaurs, they moved out with every other critter. So physical evidence. That's my favorite part. My favorite part. All right, so they've got a slide here that talks about, just outlines it really. The Stegosaurus of Cambodia, the Ecostones of Peru, the Apatosaurus of southeastern Utah. They don't even talk about the statues in Mexico or the other bunch of things I'm going to show you. Have anybody ever heard of these things before? Seen pictures of them? Does any of this ring a bell? All right, then we're fixing to blow your mind. You need to understand, I wasn't raised in a church. I grew up Methodist mainly, a little bit Baptist, like half Baptist, half Methodist, half Presbyterian, whatever, that's third, I guess. That's how you would math that out. One of the things that got me to come to Christ and agree to study the Bible was this. I was dating Laura Beth at the time. You know, she invited me to come to church on a Wednesday night, and I'm like, man, Jesus freaks go to church on Wednesday night. Who goes to church on a Wednesday night? Some people do, so it's like, you know what, that's an extra hour I get to spend with my girlfriend. Let's go to church. And it happened to be a Christian evidence class. And here's this preacher get up, talk about dinosaurs and man coexisting, and the earth's only 6,000 years old. I have seen the Discovery Channel every day of my life. I'm a science nerd. I love science. I love NASA. I love watching documentaries are my favorite thing to watch on TV, which means I'm old. It's okay. This guy is nuts. This preacher is stupid. This whole thing's idiocy. And I got to digging into it to prove him wrong, and all the evidence points in the other direction. And I'm like, man, there's something to this Bible. This is the stuff that led me to the church, to accept that the Bible is God's Word. And if it can be right about this stuff, then it can be right about salvation. And that's why this stuff is so maybe important to me, if that's the right word. All right. Remember this whole idea that if dinosaurs and man, right, dragons and man were created on the same day, day 6 of creation, and for the next several thousand years, we're living together in peace and harmony. Really, to about 500 years ago, we're living together. Not peace and harmony, but we're all living together. Would you have great-great-great-great-grandparents? Would they have known what dinosaurs or dragons look like? Yeah. Here is Inca burial stone. This was discovered for about 40 years. They were digging these things out of the ground. Now there's so many forgeries from these, it's hard to tell the difference. But the original batch was started in the 1930s. These are for anywhere between from 600 to 1000 AD. Give or take, these are 1,000 years old. What is that thing on that rock? That rock's about this big, by the way. They're all like basketball-sized rocks. Some are a little bigger, some a little smaller, but that thing is carved on the rock about this big. What is that? If you're having a hard time, I'll go get any one of these kids and they'll tell me exactly what this is. It's a dinosaur. Anybody want to tell me what kind of dinosaur that is? It's some sort of triceratops, right? This is a triceratops. We didn't put a full dinosaur skeleton back together until 1842. How did these guys 1,000 years ago know what a triceratops looked like? What's the only reasonable explanation? They saw it. What's that triceratops got on it? You see them circles, them targets on the back? Somebody has decorated their tractor. I don't know if they were painted in John Deere green or International red, I'm not sure. But people used dinosaurs as beasts of burden. Why? Why do we know that? Because here's a dude with a saddle blanket smoking a peace pipe riding on the back of a triceratops. Somebody tell me. Now, again, there's a lot of forgeries. You start researching Inca stones, you'll see pictures of like aliens and all kind of stuff that have been discovered recently. You'll find pictures of dinosaurs that look exactly the way we draw dinosaurs. The ones that were discovered in the 1930s and 40s don't look that. They've been tested, they've been proven to be genuine. They're all 1,000 to 1,500 years old. Dinosaurs were domesticated. This guy has a saddle blanket. And it's not some wild like West Rodeo bronkin bruck. Wait. You know what I'm saying. Words are very hard. This is not some rodeo, right? This is calm enough where he can sit here and smoke his peace pipe, or whatever that is. Obviously, he's blowing out smoke. It's not a tomahawk. This is a very peaceful thing. This is not so peaceful. What are those things attacking this dude? Some sort of dinosaur. Does that look like a monkey? Does that look like a crocodile or an alligator? Does that look like anything else you have seen at the St. Louis Zoo? This stone is 1,000 years old. These guys got sharp, pointy teeth. This guy in the back is chewing on the back of that dude's head while he is sticking his stone knife into this other. This is a hunter out here hunting vicious velociraptor-y kind of dinosaurs, right? Some sort of carnivorous dinosaur. Guess what? Maybe their arms are a little longer than we think about them, but proportionally they look a lot like we would think of as a carnivorous dinosaur. Huh. Funny how that is. Here is Stegosaurus, Brontosaurus, right? Big long neck. Got all these designs painted on it. Maybe that's a scale pattern. Maybe that's decoration. Maybe that's just what they did to it, right? But here is, again, how do they know what this guy looked like? The only possible explanation is that they had seen it. They had never been to a museum and saw a dinosaur. Absolutely had no idea. And people will say, well, the proportions of these things are all wrong. Modern day artists take the skeleton and we think we know where the muscle's attached. How big was that dinosaur based on that skeleton? You take my skeleton and you take, back in the day, Arnold Schwarzenegger skeleton. Maybe you take the Rock skeleton. Right? Now, granted, those guys are taller than I am, but it's the same size skeleton. How do we know, do I look different than the Rock? I'm much more handsome, right? Probably. Modern day artists, when you ask them to take a skeleton of a hippopotamus or some of these other things and draw what they look like, scary, crazy animals. These things are probably actually better proportioned because this is what the thing actually looked like as it was walking. The Acambaro statues in Mexico, these are all from 200 to 800 AD. These were discovered in 1945. Name one animal at the St. Louis Zoo that looks like. These statues, again, were discovered. What does that look like? I'll go get one of them kids out there, and they'll say, Mr. Josh, that's a brontosaurus. I'd say, you are right. That is certainly not an alligator or a crocodile. That's nothing. It's not a giraffe. It's nothing else that we could talk about. The Bible.ca is a great place to go for resources like this. This website is old. Somebody built this website in like 1997, and it hasn't been changed. So it's old, but there's a lot of good information out there. Again, all of these statues were discovered in Mexico in 1945. They're all, give or take, 1,200 years old. The Prom Temple in Cambodia. This temple was built 800-ish. It was in effect, right? People were worshiping actively in here until 1431. After that, these people kind of died out. Jungle took it back. We rediscovered it much later than that. So there are monkeys and there are antelopes and there's all sorts of real physical life creatures. There are no unicorns. There are no any, minotaurs or nothing fantasy related on all these little carvings you see on the left-hand side. They're all actual animals. You just go out in the jungle or the plains and see them. What's that thing there in the middle that these people carved 1,000 years ago? I'll go get any one of them kids and they'll say, Mr. Josh, that's a Stegosaurus. And they would be right. How did they know what that thing looked like? They had to have seen one. Again, even if you take the 1431 date there, this is still 400 years before we ever reconstruct a dinosaur skeleton. The only way they knew what that looked like is because they had seen it. Oh, man. So, Native American petroglyphs, right? You got the Apatosaurus in the top right-hand corner, which is what they mentioned on their slide. I love the Brontosaurus, Natural Bridge National Monument. We got this little guy over here in the right-hand corner. Don't look like anything else I've ever seen at the zoo. Doesn't look like any other Ice Age creature that we've had preserved, right? We get woolly mammoths, we get saber-toothed tigers, we get all this, giant sloths, stuff that used to be around here. Interesting enough, we can't think of any good use for Osage oranges, hedge apples, whatever you want to call them. But we find hedge apples in the bellies of woolly mammoths when we dig them up. So we make bows and other things out of them. We make hedgerows out of them. Woolly mammoths ate that stuff. It was part of their whole ecosystem. Just like woolly mammoths used to be here, we coexisted with them. We also coexisted with these guys. Native Americans, right? Asia, Europe, Central South America, Africa, all these places. There's all this artwork that depicts it. Even here. So this is an Egyptian stele that goes back to 3100 BC. This is a long time ago, right? This is 4,000 years ago. Or no, more than that, 5,000 years ago. Dinosaurs and man, let me blow it up, make it a little easier to see. What are those things? You ever seen a giraffe with a tail that big? Or proportion that way, right? Giraffes are more straight up and down, right? Their back's at a 45-degree angle. Their heads certainly don't look like that. Right? There's bulls, there's other things. This is not a fantasy inscription. Those are brontosauruses of some kind, right? And you see the guys on the side, what have they done to these things? Can you see on the picture? They've roped them. And it looks like there's even some sort of muzzle on them, right? They've got some sort of rope. They're controlling these things. You ask me how did they build the pyramids? I don't know. Dinosaurs might have drug up the blocks. No idea. But I do know that Egyptians have depictions of dinosaurs, right? Here's a Greek mosaic from the 4th century, right? So this is not too long ago. Greek mosaic, right? All sorts of stuff that we found. What are those two things in the middle with the fish and the dolphin? They look a whole lot like dinosaurs. I like this, right? This is the Carlisle Cathedral. This is the Archbishop of Canterbury is here. These are two dinosaurs with their necks intertwined. This is a little bronze band that's about yay wide. And this guy, how many people want to be buried in the aisle of the church building right here? Well, the Archbishop of Canterbury right here. In the Carlisle Cathedral, he's buried right here. Right there's like a 6-foot little bronze frame set into the floor. That's why it's kind of been faded out a little bit. But there are hunting dogs and there are people and all sorts of stuff. 1496. What year did Columbus sail across the ocean blue? 1492. 4 years after Columbus set sail. People are still recording historical pictures and diagrams and descriptions of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs aren't 365 million years ago. They're not 10,000 years ago. They existed 500 or 600 years ago. They were common 500 or 600 years ago. Written accounts, right? Herodotus, Marco Polo. Man, Marco Polo in his journals, right? His historical journals talk about meeting dinosaurs or dragons all over. Alexander the Great talks about it. Conrad Gessner. English monks, we talked about some of those accounts, right? All sorts of written accounts where there's not pictures, but people wrote down, hey, this happened today. Not fantasy, not stories, not fables, not Grendel and Beowulf stuff. Just everyday occurrences, recording history. This is what we saw today. Nothing crazy. The only possible way to explain any of this is the fact that they saw these things. All right, so this is in Texas, right? So you have man walking straight ahead, dinosaurs walking to the right. On the right hand, you see an actual imprint, right? Here is a human footprint, and a dinosaur has come along later and stepped. You can actually see the mud squishing out into the human footprint. I mean, you give me one other thing that has a footprint that looks just like that. That's got to be a dinosaur. By the way, there are some atheists who have over the years went and taken pickaxes and things and destroyed some of this evidence. But that is the same from a geological perspective, right? That's the same seam of rock, same seam of sedimentary mud that was laid down at the right same time, and here these dinosaurs have come walking through it. We talk about polystrate fossils, and this hopefully this was all part of your talk on the flood the other night, but polystrate fossils, we have trees. They go through dozens sometimes of layers of sediment set down. We also have polystrate footprints where some dinosaur came through here and it went through 3 or 4 different layers. So that dinosaur footprint is 4 million years older in the bottom than it is in the top. Impossible. This is hard to see, I know. This is the Meissner print. This was found in Utah in 1968. Here is a woven, and if you can find the picture online, you can actually see the threads that somebody had just woven, right? Some hemp or something else, right? And made some sort of sandal. And they stepped on a trilobite. That's what that little circle thing is. Trilobites lived about 1 billion years ago. And we use those as a keystone fossil, right, to date this rock layer. Oh, there's trilobites in here. That means this rock is 1 billion years old. This guy just stepped on one. That means all of these things are cohabitating together. The geologic time span is not exactly what we think it is. That thing's been tried to be destroyed several times. Right? Because the whole thing is that fossils, right? If we're familiar with the whole fossilization process, something dies, mud comes, covers the whole thing up, and only all of the hard parts are preserved. Then somebody explain to me flowers. Is there anything in life more delicate than a flower? And yet we have fossilized flowers, right? Dogwood flowers, we have fossilized leaves. I've got some fossilized ginkgo leaves that I keep on my bookshelf. Here's the mummy ankylosaur. This was discovered just a few years ago, 2017. That thing can almost just get up and walk out. It's completely mummified, you know. And then this is the kicker. This is the stuff that's still going around in scientific circles that we can't quite explain yet. I mean, we can. 2006, this lady was sawing up, right, for DNA and for other reasons. She was sawing up little microscopic sections. You know, like you do squash or okra, right? You cut it up in little sections. That's what she's doing with this T-Rex bone. And she's like, wait, this stuff's still juicy on the inside. They were able to squeeze out not a drop of blood necessarily, but a drop of red blood cells. It's stretchy, it's fibrous. I don't know that you'd want to eat it, but if it's 365 million years old and have been fossilized, how do you get juicy, squishy meat out of a T-Rex? Dinosaur soft tissue. This is an electron microscope version of tissue being stretched inside of a vertebrae, right? It's still stretchy on the inside. Dinosaurs can't be as old as what mainstream science says they are because, and that was just the first, right? It was a T-Rex bone. It was in 2006. We have found dozens of others. Now that we know to kind of slice up the bones and what we're looking for, get into the marrow a little bit, we're finding all sorts of actual tissue that's still left. Does not happen. Does not happen over millions of years. Over hundreds or thousands, yes. Millions, it cannot happen. What's next on the slideshow here? So are you saying dinosaurs were on the ark? Of course they were. The largest dinosaur egg we've found is still about this big. Could Noah have taken baby dinosaurs on the ark? Well, yeah, but they're not reproductive age. They're not, mature enough to reproduce. God's going to take care of the two brontosauruses until they get big enough to mate. It's going to be fine. The average size of a dinosaur is about yay big. The same size as everything else going on the ark. God knew exactly how big to make the ark, and he told Noah to do just that. And as hatchlings, right, even the dinosaurs were no bigger than your average house pet. They say that the average hatchling of a dinosaur is like 30 pounds. That's the size of my dog. So what happened to the dinosaurs? This is cool stuff, right? Changing the environment. After, Christians don't have to be scared of science at all. After the, I had a bottle of water. I probably left it right up here. I'm drying out here. After the flood, right, all of this water evaporates. What happens when it evaporates? What happens to the air? Cools down. Massive evaporation, planet-wide evaporation leads to ice ages. Do lizards live really well in cold, dry climates? Not so much. I think it was interesting. One of those latest Jurassic Park movies they came out with, there's all these dinosaurs living in the snow in Montana. I'm like, be interested to see if that was actually how it worked. Changing in the environment, right? Atmospheric pressure is different. We know that, right? Because Methuselah lived 969 years, died the year of the flood. After that, Abraham only lived to be 175 years. After the flood, the world is different. The atmospheric pressure is different. We lose the water canopy that keeps the atmospheric pressure high, that blocks UV radiation, all these things. All of these things happen. Life gets a little bit smaller because it can't flourish and can't grow so much. Diets change, all that stuff. It's a combination of climate and cultural factors. What do we do to big, scary animals as a species, humans? Are there any more wolves left in Ireland or England? And there haven't been since about the 1400s. Why? Because they killed them all. What do we do to wolves in the United States? I just read an article today. There are 30 red wolves left in all the southeastern United States. Why? These things are after my cattle. I'm going to kill all of these things. And we go out and do it. You know, the American bison. You know, that's a whole big thing in and of itself, right? We almost murdered all of them. You know, there are people like me who like to go up in the mountains and hunt elk in the fall. Love it. You know why they're all up in the elk? Even though Lewis and Clark said that up and down the Missouri River they would see elk grazing in fields. Because we kill all the big stuff. Because it feeds a lot of people, because it's scary, because we can use their bones of, you know, these giant bones and all sorts of different ways. When you look at the way humans treat predator species, lions, tigers, bears, all that stuff, all those things are endangered or threatened across the world. Why? Because we kill things that can kill us. That's what we do. Big, scary dinosaurs are having a hard time surviving the way that they are. And they hang on for a long time until cultural and climate adaptations kill them all off. Now, could you still find a dinosaur in some jungle that's never been touched? Maybe. You know, but I know that they were pretty commonplace 500 or 600 years ago. Or they're probably becoming less and less so. The thing is, we probably hunted most of them out. We know for a fact, based on the pictures we've seen, and so much more evidence that I couldn't even bring into class, that we cohabitated. So the application, this is what they want us to talk about at the very end. Not all of our questions are going to have answers. Teens and young kids have a hard time with this, right? Why? Why? Deuteronomy 29:29 is my favorite passage in all of Scripture. Does somebody know or can quote Deuteronomy 29:29? The secret things belong to the Lord our God. There are some things we cannot and will not know this side of eternity. All things that pertain to life and to godliness we have been given. What happened to the dinosaurs? Doesn't pertain to life and to godliness. We're curious. This is one of the many things that will tell me that the Bible is inspired. If I wrote the Bible, would it have a lot more about dinosaurs in it? Yeah. Man, I tell you about all this kind of stuff if I was recording it. God's like, yeah, dinosaurs are cool, but you don't need to know about them. You need to know about Jesus. You need to know about the church. You need to know about the sacrifice. You need to know about the history of the Israelite people. Dinosaurs are cool, but just a footnote compared to all the stuff that's going on. God does not and will not ask us to do the impossible, right? Dinosaurs are not a challenge to our faith. That would be impossible because dinosaurs were real and we can prove it. And then if we do our part, God is going to do His part. We just keep preaching the truth, and then God is going to allow us to preach that truth if we ask for boldness. But these are one of those things where we have to be involved at. I appreciate y'all's time and attention. Let's close with a word of prayer real quick. Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day, and we're thankful for the opportunity to study from your word. We're thankful for the opportunity to understand that science and scriptures go together, and as Christians we shouldn't balk or be afraid of these things. We pray that you would give us boldness, Father, to go out and to have these conversations, that we have them in the nature of spirit and in truth. We know that people will look at us funny, and we know that we are to be a peculiar people anyway, Father. Help us to always put you first, to use these things to help bolster our faith, and especially the faith of our children and grandchildren. Help us to be an encouragement to them, Father. Help us to take all the evidence that we look at that comes from your flood, Father. Help us to look at it and to grow our faith with it. We're so thankful for Jesus, and it's in His name that we pray. Amen.